Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the State of Leadership Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays talking all things leadership. 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And thank you for joining us for what is the first episode of 2025. So we made it through another year, Robert.
Yeah.
And have been ushered into a new year. And I would say this year I'm seeing memes and things, none of the things are um there's some tragedies that have happened, but the way humans respond sometimes is to try to make light of
Make light,
things
yeah.
so that we can endure, right? And so I've seen memes, some memes that are like, I don't think I signed up for this. It's like 2025 is usher. Can I get a refund on 2025? And of course, we cannot, right? We cannot. And we have to deal the cards that are dealt. And that is actually a lot of what we talk about here on the show, right? Building resilience and being able to adapt and to work with what is, whether it's in your life, it's in your community, your family, your company, relationships, work, whatever it is, that we have cards that are dealt and we have to find our way through, because the alternative um isn't so great either, right? And so if we don't develop that muscle and that ability to endure, to be resilient, to bounce back, then we wither. And it's there's some really tragic things that are happening, but tragic things are always happening, and we simply have to find a way through.
Yeah, you don't really get a do-over. You can see how things are going and try to restructure how you approach things, but you have to make the most of the, like you said, the cards you dealt. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit in our conversation today, not specifically about any of the things that are happening. And so if you are watching this live, one of the big things that is currently happening are the fires in Southern California.
Yeah.
I've gotten some questions and inquiries from family and friends, about whether or not we're impacted. We actually are not particularly close to what's happening in Southern California. We're in Central California, but we're a good 5-6 hours away from the fire. So, barring, I don't know, winds and embers flying, we are safe. But I do know people who are impacted, evacuated, and I've got a family member whose family member, someone that I don't know, but a member
Right.
of the family of someone I know who's lost their home. So, we keep positive thoughts and prayers for what's happening Southern California and all kinds of things that are happening around the world. But what we're going to talk about, and again, this is a way to build the muscles that we need for addressing and dealing with tragedies that happen in life, um, is to be introspective and reflective and look at what is happening in our lives that are positive, and the things that are happening that are not, right? Looking at our, what we're going to call today, wins and losses. We're going to be reflecting on wins and losses and how you can use this I will say practice to reach your goals, to improve your life, to improve your team, your leadership, your relationships in general. And so you can apply this in all manner of in all sorts of things in different ways. It not just at the beginning of the year. And so we're constantly talking here about your vision and setting goals. And this is no different, except that the beginning of a new year is sort of a natural time, as are birthdays and anniversaries of things. They're just sort of natural milestones and times that we can use to reflect, to look back, see what's working, see what's not working, and then make some decisions on what we can do moving forward to make things the way we want them. I have a question for you, Robert.
Sure.
Do you set resolutions?
I do not. I probably have not had a New Year's resolution. Oh my goodness, in years. I can't even tell you how many. But I was, it's funny. In preparation for today's show, I was thinking about the last time I had a New Year's resolution, and I'm not trying to brag in any way, but I never had one around weight, because that's usually what people. It's like, I'm going to get in shape, because I was, I was an athlete for many, many years. Although now that may not be a bad idea. but I've never really had resolutions. I have looked at things like, okay, well, this year I'm going to push forward a little more with a particular project, or maybe get a certification or something like that. But it wasn't necessarily a resolution. I looked at it more like a natural progression in my development, whatever that was, and whatever thing I was doing.
It's interesting when I don't know if we've talked about this in the past for past New Year's episodes, but when I was a kid, I always looked forward to setting resolutions. And I don't know if it was a function of I didn't really know what that meant, or or what. But in school, at the beginning of the year, when we came back after the Christmas holidays, right? We would come in and the teacher would ask, "So, what's your New Year's resolution?" And we would go around the class and people would share. And I find it interesting, actually. You don't set resolutions. I guess I would say to some degree, I don't set resolutions. At least I don't say it in a way, "Oh, here's my New Year's resolution," or "I'm setting a resolution." But the reality is, we all set resolutions, right? When we make the definition of resolution is simply a firm decision to do or not do something. And so we are constantly setting resolutions. And I don't know if this is a function of our culture's need to not have winners and losers, right? For us to not feel bad. I know that when I read articles about don't set a resolution, do this instead, it's usually focused around the fact that most of us, resolutions, goals, etc., we set them, we make them, and then we don't follow through with them, and we feel bad, and it creates some sort of a vicious cycle. Therefore, the answer is don't set resolutions, rather than looking at the reason that your resolutions didn't work, or your goals didn't work, or you didn't achieve your goals, and saying, what can I do instead to make sure that I get to the outcome that I'm desiring? And there are all sorts of tips, tricks, hints, strategies that we can apply that make it at least more likely than not that we achieve what we want to achieve. And it's interesting that you mentioned, in particular, you've never had to set a resolution or really a goal around weight. It's not an issue for you. It is for a huge number of particularly Americans,
Yeah.
but becoming more and more of an issue worldwide. Certainly is something that has been a part of my life, is almost as far back as I can remember, even when I was not, I will say, over heavy.
Mhm.
It was something, and maybe it's more of a thing for women than men. I don't know. Um, our culture, Madison Avenue, all the things. But as far back as I can remember, paying attention to weight has been a part of my life. And I would say this: the more I paid attention to it, the more weight. So it's not right. But going back to the definition of a resolution, really having a goal is about that firm decision to do or not to do something. And what we talk about as coaches with our clients is whatever the goal is, whether it's about weight or changing a job or becoming a manager or better leader, buying a house, whatever it is getting in touch with your why, right? What is the motivation behind it? And we know that the pathway to achieving goals, whatever goal it is to be clear about what it is you want, to be clear about why it is you want it, and then to be so committed to that thing, wanting that thing more than not wanting the thing, wanting the alternative, because you're going to have to make choices and trade-offs, and in some cases sacrifices, in order to get what you want. And you've got to want it like you want air, right? For some things come to us more easily or more naturally. Other things we really have to fight for, right? We have to, there's a cost to be paid in order to have that thing. And so being resolute, right? Being firm in the decision to pursue that thing no matter what becomes a part of the equation.
I agree. And I think, and I was writing some notes down while you were talking, and two things, because a couple of things popped into my head. The first is one of the reasons I believe that resolutions fail, or if you want to even go deeper into it, the reason why you need a resolution is because many people don't pay attention to their goals prior, right? So, not to beat a dead horse, but let's talk about losing weight. Many people may have an idea that they want to lose weight, but that whole year prior, they're not really paying attention because other things are going on, or maybe they started and then they had the failure to launch, or maybe they started and had to stop. Maybe they were working out and got injured, and then they just set it aside, or it
Yeah.
was too hard, whatever it is. And when the new year, so they don't get back into it, and they use the new year as it's kind of like that light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
I'll wait until January, because if I make the resolution, I'm more apt to get it done. I think that's one thing. The other thing is, as you were talking, if you set up a system where you have, and I learned this, it's something I knew, but I really learned it in fine detail from David Peterson and David Goldsmith, was action reflection. If you what in life or in leadership, if you create or have a goal and you're moving toward that goal, if you have an action, you're doing something related to that goal, you need to set some reflection time so you can say, okay, how did I do? What needs to be adjusted? Where do I want to push myself a little bit more? where do I need to back off a little bit? Let's take exercising. Maybe you waited into the new year and you're gung ho and you go at it full bore and you may get injured, right? So where do I need to back off? Where do I need to push myself a little bit more in order to make this goal sustainable? And I think that we sometimes forget that. And the last thing I want to point out, I remember once I had a boss that would frequently at the beginning of the new year come to the department. Would come to the department with a new project, something that he wanted to do. And he was like, well, this year I want to do this. How can we do this? We'd have this big meeting. And by the end of the first quarter, it was as if the meeting never even happened. It was gone. And then if you brought it up, he would kind of like, it was almost like it wasn't even on his radar anymore. And so the whole purpose is why, the whole thought is why do that if you're not going to put a plan in place to carry through and to execute?
Yeah, it's, you mentioned action reflection, and that's where we're going to spend our time here, right? Sort of this reflection aspect of it. It's one thing to set a goal, and we need to be clear, have we really set a goal, or do we just have a wish or a desire for something? Right, to get really clear, because and sticking with the dropping weight goal, the dropping weight desire, do you just want to shed a pound or two? Do you want to lose some weight? Are you clear about what you want to lose? And are you clear about why? Going back to the why. And so you want to certainly, and we're not specifically going to spend the time on goals. We've done a SMART goals session. I believe that you can see in the archives. You can go on YouTube and look at past episodes. I'm pretty sure we've done a SMART goals episode. Goal setting, have done some goal setting episodes. So this is not specifically on setting goals, but you do want to make sure that your goals are SMART, right? That they're specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. And otherwise, what you have is a desire or a wish or a dream for something. And it's not just about setting a goal, it's about putting a plan into place in order to make the goal happen. And part of that then includes the evaluation, the reflection aspect of looking at what worked, what didn't, so that if you miss the mark, you can make some adjustments so that you could take new actions or continued actions in order to get where you're going. And so we're going to be talking about that, the wins and losses, and how to use that, how to do what we're going to call an audit, right? A win-loss audit, so that you can ask a few questions. This is not a difficult thing to do. You're going to ask a few questions so that you can figure out where your successes were, right? Even if you don't get to the ultimate outcome, along the journey, there probably were some wins, some things that went well, some things that worked. And if you can identify those, then as you refine the plan, your implementation plan, you can say, maybe I need to do more of this, less of that, right? Paying attention, being mindful. You make a good point. We aren't always in the moment about what we're doing or where it is we think we're going. And then we look up and we're 6 months in and wonder what happened. I'll share an example from last year with you. So I started the year with a goal to read 24 books,
I remember that.
which basically boils down to 2 books a month. I started the year great. And I was like at 8 or 10 books, before we were 2 months into the year. So I was ahead of schedule and I was happy with the progress. And life happens, right? And so one day I didn't read and it was like, okay, no big deal. And then it was 2 days I didn't read. And then it was three. And then I lost sight of the fact that I hadn't read. And I looked up and literally months had passed since I had picked up a book. Now, I was still doing some other reading, right? I have Bible study and there's some things that I do for work. So it wasn't as if I wasn't reading, but the very intentional goal I had to read books, right? I lost sight of that, just as you said, because I was no longer paying attention, which goes to, and I want to bring this up in the context of simple and our simple principle, which is self-aware, which includes the principles of self-awareness, intentionality, mastery, purposefulness, leverage, and energy. And that concept of intentionality, right? And taking the time to be deliberate, committed, resolute, if you will, to what it is that you are doing. And in my case, what it is I was doing on a daily basis. And so it was easy at the beginning because part of the way I started last year is the way I've started the last few years is with a 31-day movement challenge, right? And the last 2 years in particular, I started with the 75 hard challenge. So 75 hard includes reading 10 pages a day of something that's self improvement, personal development. So it was very easy those first 75 days, I would say 90 days. I probably got to the middle of April before it stopped and then lost track. And I looked up and literally it was like September. And I was like, oh, I haven't picked up a book in a while. And so I picked up a book and started reading again. Um, and when I'm talking reading, I don't include Audible, right?
Right.
Which technically is reading a book, but when I'm thinking actually picking up, holding a book, or at least on my iPad,
Right.
reading it through the Kindle app. So, there were other things that I was ingesting or participating in that was that, but it wasn't the same thing. And so it's okay, right? The world didn't come to an end because I didn't finish 24 books in a particular manner, right? The world didn't come to an end because I didn't shed, the pounds that I wanted to lose or any of those things. The world did not come to an end. But if I want to continue to move towards that goal, start with make an assessment whether or not that really is the goal that you want to pursue. Get clear about what it is, make it smart, right? Be crystal clear about what it is. Can you measure whether or not you reach this outcome? Put a time frame on it, right? This month, next month, 6 weeks, at the end of the year, whatever it is. Which, by the way, I'm going through the program 12-week year, which condenses this down so that we don't have. Which is one of the things is sometimes we give ourselves too much time to achieve something, and it gets lost in that. And so condensing that time down keeps us sort of under the constant tension of taking action rather than, oh, I've got time. Just as an aside. So all of that, looking at this concept of the wins and losses within the simple framework, and asking some questions. And so we've put together actually a framework for this and some questions. We'll share what they are. You don't need this document, but if you'd like to have it to make it a little easier, and it includes some instructions for how to complete it, we have a wins and loss audit that you can get a copy of, and you can complete it on that document. So if you'd like to get a copy of that, just drop wins and loss audit in the comments, and I will get a copy of it to you.
Yeah, there are so many things that popped into my head when you were talking about, your 24 book challenge to yourself. And it's really interesting because I think the first thing that came up for me was that's why goal trackers are so important. So you can look at, hey, this is the goal. I'm checking in. You make it part of that ritual to check in to see, okay, I've done X amount. I have X amount to go. I'm halfway there. That's one thing. It's a very simple concept, but you'd be surprised at how much you can improve by simply tracking your goal, so that you're moving toward it every day. That's easy. That steady progress towards your goal. And this is in anything you can do this, whether it's working out, whether it's in music, if you're a musician and you want a leader, anything you're doing, just make sure that you have that steady march towards your goal. That's one thing. The other thing that came to my head is you started off so strong, maybe too strong. And sometimes it's better to start off slower or to have a smaller goal. And so that you can hit your goal, and then the next time redo it, so you're doing more, you add to it. Or start with my clients when they have something really daunting, I'll say, okay, what's one small thing you can do to move you toward that goal? Because just getting that momentum sometimes is enough to propel you to do more. It looks like you're going to be pushing this boulder up the hill, but if you can get one thing done, then it leads to you getting another thing done, and so on and so on. That's the other thing. And I think that I always said sometimes it's better to just take those little bite-sized chunks out of the goal. It's great to have. How should I say this? There's merit to both having those big audacious goals and having those smaller goals that lead you towards something you've never done before. Both have merit.
No, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that is important, and this goes back to self-awareness, is understanding who you are and how you work, what works for you. Are you someone who needs to set big, hairy, audacious goals, right? The BHAGs. Do you need to do that and then break it down into component parts so that, and keep track? And that's such a good point, to keep track of the milestones, and the big milestones, but the little ones. And you're right that in the beginning, I started strong. I think it was because there were a couple of things that were conspiring to help that. One was the 75 hard.
Yep.
So it required 10 pages a day. And so it was easy to be reading 10 pages a day, because it was part of yet a different goal that I had. Right. So I had that. And so the goals, what is it? To go stacking. It was stacked. And so when 75 hard ended, the push to read 10 pages a day was no longer there.
Right.
While the longer term goal, so I could have continued and said, okay, 75 hard is over. I'm going to continue reading 10 pages a day. and keep going, the 10 pages a day went away. And so when life happened, whatever that was, and it wasn't something traumatic or, drastic, but it was something that took me off my game. When that happened, it was easy to let go of that because I wasn't as committed to the reading daily. The big goal was there, but the more of the bite-sized chunk goals, the
Right.
daily goal was no longer there. And so it became easy to sort of, well, I'll get back to that tomorrow. I'll get back to that tomorrow. And you look up and months have passed and nothing's happened. So I absolutely agree with you. Tracking is important. Being committed to disciplined, right, and committed and disciplined to doing something each and every day, no matter how small, because everything you do that moves you towards that goal is is getting you there, and it doesn't have to look a particular way. It's just this is the commitment. So here I am. It's 2025. I have started the year again with 75 hard. I do have a goal to read daily. And we'll see where that lands me at the end of the year. So it's less about the number of books, but it is about reading daily. And so if I do that, I may look up and it'll be 24 books, maybe it's 12 books, maybe it's 102 books. I don't know. But I've set the goal for this particular thing in a slightly different way. And at the end of 75 hard, the goal will be to continue to read daily, right? So again, if I do that, they could, maybe that's one page, maybe it's 10 pages, maybe it's I read until my eyes blur over, right?
Well, yeah. And I call that you setting a baseline goal, right? So you want a baseline to kind of gauge. And we do this all in all kinds of things. It's that we do it in sports, we do it in music. You just want to see where you're at. So, okay, this year I did 15 books. Next year I can do 20 or whatever. So it's getting that baseline. But we all do this. I mean, you did it, I do it all the time. It's like when we engage in something that we haven't done before, like I can, I can run the New York Marathon, right? Spoiler alert, I cannot.
Good luck.
Yeah, I can't do that. But there's people that do that. They go like, this year, this is a good year for me to run the marathon. Have you run before? Right? I mean, are you running now? Are you going to start in January and hopefully you'll be there by November? It's possible, but unless you're going to start small and build, the likelihood of that happening is going to be slim to nil, because running 26 or whatever miles that is, if you just want to do that in one shot to see what your baseline is, good luck, because you'll probably end up in the hospital or at least injured in some way. You need to start small and then start building on that. And some people, they get really gung-ho, and I do this too. And that looks like something I can do. And then I make a goal that's way too ambitious, and I start to lose interest in it. And I talk to my clients all the time because I'm very interested in influence and persuasion. And one of the things that I suggest to my clients when they go, well, I want to do this as a goal, but I'm worried about sustaining it. I go, make a public declaration. Tell people you want to do it. Because once you do that, it starts to put that pressure on you.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll move you toward that. Writing it down is also so. And if you want to combine those things, it's very helpful. So I tell people that you want to do it. That'll put some pressure on it. Tell someone you don't like you're going to do it.
So I'm having a technical problem, Robert. So I'm going to keep talking.
Okay.
And I'm going to address it.
Okay, no problem at all. So basically what I'm saying
is you keep talking.
I am. If you go ahead and you make a public declaration, and I made a joke and said, tell someone you don't like, or someone who doesn't like you, because that person will probably bring it up. I thought you were going to do this, and it puts that pressure on you. It doesn't have to be someone that you don't get along with, but I'm just using that as an example and a joke. But that will put pressure on you to continue toward your goal. I have a friend who years ago had a crush on somebody, and he told them that he knew how to play guitar, and he didn't. That made him go out and actually learn how to play the guitar because he had made that public declaration. So that's one thing. And so there are a couple of other things that you can do when you're goal setting. We talked about bite-sized chunks. We talked about making a public declaration. We talked about writing it down, uh, getting a baseline goal for yourself. I think all of those things are very helpful when you're trying to move toward a specific goal that you have for yourself or for your team.
Hopefully that solved my problem.
Okay.
We'll see.
Okay.
If you lose me, it's because I didn't solve it, but I think that I have. So you're absolutely right. And the bite size, and you mentioned realistic, right? When we have to be realistic. So it's okay to set large goals, to have BHAGs, but we also want to make sure that it is realistic for our lifestyle, the bigger vision of what we want and the values that we have. And sometimes the things that we think that we want, the goals that we have, are in conflict. And when you have that conflict, there's a cognitive dissonance going on. It is also going to get in the way of you being able to achieve your goals. So let's talk about the wins and losses and some of the questions that you can ask yourself when you're reflecting. And we'll use last year as an example, but it could be any goal that came from any point in time that you are working towards or in the past have attempted to work towards. And let's start with the wins, right? To get some insight on what worked. So ask the question, what worked? Not only what worked, but why did it work? Why did it succeed? Right? Was it the efforts that you made? Was it that you were extremely committed? Right? And I look over, and this is what I've been doing as I've been, I'll say, addressing the weight issue in my own life is when I look at the things that I've done that I have succeeded, the goals that I've set where I have gotten through law school, right? Grad school, which is where I met you. What about those experiences allowed me to get through law school? I was in law school 4 years at night as a single parent, right? How did I get through that? Where at one point in time, or over the course of 2 years, I was commuting like 300 miles a day, going from home to work, from work to school, school back home, right? What was it that made it possible for me to do that? Why did I succeed? Some of it is school is laid out in a way where the measuring stick, the milestones are built in.
Sure.
Right? You go to class, there's one semester at a time, or a quarter at a time, or a term at a time, however long that lasts. That ends, you take the exam, that ends, and then you move into the next one, right? So there's a steady progression. Our program, I think there were 8-week courses or 6-week courses, right? You finish a course, you do the next course, you finish that course, right? So there were milestones built in that helped keep us on track. And so that becomes a part of what I did and my why for why I wanted to do that in both of those instances, in law school and in grad school, were very clear to me. Right. And so I take a step back and I would say to you, take a step back. How clear is your why? Is it crystal clear? And then you ask the question, how can you replicate what you've done? So you've done it in a different arena. What can you replicate and bring to bear on the current goal? So if it is that bite-sized chunks, that's what classes are. Each course is its own bite-sized chunk. And then you break that down, right? You have a syllabus and it lays out what you're doing each week of the course and what assignments are due and when they're due. So can you do that? Can you replicate that for the goal that you currently have? And then you want to do the same thing with your losses. Ask the question, what didn't work? Right? What factors led to it not working? Was it that you weren't fully committed? Was it that you didn't make time? Right? If we stick with this weight loss goal, did you not make time to prep your food, to go to the grocery store, to go to the gym, or to get out and walk every day? Did you not make time? Did you make other choices rather than the choices that led to you accomplishing that goal? Right? It's easy to say, I chose laying on the couch over going to the gym, right? You can see that. Maybe not in the moment, one day at a time, but if you do the reflection and look back and are honest with yourself, you can see how that could have led to the outcome that you have.
Yeah, I think one of the key things, and I don't think we really talked about this, so pardon me if we have, but in this particular episode, but one of the things I think is very helpful when you're resolving to do something is to know what motivates you. I'm a very competitive person. Uh, I'm not necessarily proud of that, but I'm a pretty competitive person. So if I see somebody doing something that I want to do and doing it well, that's motivation for me. To kind of, I don't want to say directly compete with that person, but it motivates me to do it, especially if it's a goal I've already had. Um, and I think about that because you can actually compete against yourself if you're competitive. Like set goals, and last week I did this. I want to do this week. So you're kind of gamifying what you're doing. But I was thinking about when you talked about grad school, it was only what 16 or what was it 18 months, something like that. But that was a particularly grueling. There were times when that was really, it got really tricky and hard at some points, when you had to balance your life, work, and writing papers. And these weren't like, oh, write a 4-page paper. These are like, you got to write a 40, 25-page paper so you really had to get those bite-sized chunks. And I remember I would do 3 pages a day at some point. I would get started early, right? 3 pages a day. Sometimes it was
Why
4
would it I
pages
know you would get started early?
because I know myself, and and I'll tell you why. That's a great
Self-awareness.
self-awareness. Because when I was in undergraduate school, I was a habitual crammer, and I did well, but I hated how it made me feel. There was always that panic the night before or the week that a paper was due, complete panic. This is before everybody had personal computers. So you had to go find someone who would type up all your research for you. If you weren't a great typist, I was not at the time. So, all my lady friends knew to make themselves available, because then I'd be buying them gifts and stuff. Like 2 weeks before the paper was due, all of a sudden they'd be popping around, hanging around. Hey, dinners would start happening because I knew I needed to smooze people because I wasn't a great typist. I got better as years went on and as PCs became more ubiquitous. But it was one of those weird things. And so I know myself. So when I got into grad school, I was like, I am not doing that again.
Yeah.
Not going to stay up 24 hours. I mean, there was a point in undergrad where I stayed up 24 hours to complete a project because I had not planned it. I'm never doing that again. So when grad school came around, I was like, I'm going to get started early, even if I'm writing 2 pages a day. That seems like I would do that. And so I remember like the week, the paper was due. I forget who I was. I don't know if I was talking to you or our friend Steve. I said, and one of you was still working. I was like, I'm done. I'm just proofreading. I think it was our friend, and I was like,
that must have been Steve.
yeah. I said, I'm proofreading. I'm done. I'm just proofreading right now. And he's like, how did you do it? I said, I got started early, 2 pages a day. Diligently knocked it out. But those things got really grueling. And balancing that. And it was a really good, I think a really good laboratory for, looking at what we as entrepreneurs do, because we
Right.
have other things, other projects we're working on. And you and I, we work, we have things that we're building, we have things in the works. And so we have to look at how do we balance generating the money that's all, to keep the lights on, and creating something that's going to be a product later on.
Right. Right. And that's so true. And I love the self-awareness around that, right? This you did exactly this. What didn't work for you in undergrad, right? And how can I avoid that in grad school? And so that is, as leaders, one of the things that we have to do is be open to learning, continuously learning, continuously growing as a person, which requires us to have a level of self-awareness so that we can look and see what's working, what's not working, so that we can replicate what is working, and then adapt and avoid those things that aren't working so that we can get closer and closer to our goal. I want to use a simple example with this that will hopefully illustrate how you can use these questions and um, help you in your role as a leader specifically, but also just in general in life, how you can use this win-loss audit. So here's just a practical exercise. Let's say that your goal, it was to improve um, teamwork, collaboration amongst your team, right? And you ask the question, what worked? And let's say that what worked was having weekly check-ins, right? Having your team check in weekly. That helped to improve collaboration because you guys were communicating continuously. You knew what other people were doing. What was something that helped you to succeed? Why did it succeed? Maybe you used a tool like Asana or Slack or some other tool, right? That helped you to be better align with each other in real time, and not whether you are co-located or not, right? That this allowed you to be more efficient with your connection and your collaboration, communication between team meetings. You could still stay on top. And then keeping your meetings short and productive. All right. Nobody needs super long, hour long, 2 hour long meetings where you're off track and and then people are distracted. So you stay focused, short meetings, everyone knows to come to bring what they have in terms of this is the status of my portion of this program and what I'm doing and how it's working. And so that would be an example of looking at what worked in the win column, right? What didn't work, right? What didn't work? Maybe the email communication wasn't happening as regularly as it should have, right? Or asking the question, what led to that? That expectations weren't communicated, or that they were communicated but somehow they were misaligned, and that created problems with members of the team being able to make sure that everyone was on track and um, didn't miss deadlines. And then the final question is, how can you adapt or avoid and recognize the things that led to deadlines being missed? Maybe it was overwhelmed. Maybe there was too much piled on. And so people being, team members being overwhelmed led to inconsistent communication. And one of the things that we know that happens is when we are overwhelmed, we tend to tune out, right? And we don't engage. And if we're not engaged when we're working with other people, and to a huge extent, even when we're just working by ourselves, right? When we're overwhelmed, that leads to withdrawal, disengagement, and inconsistent action, inconsistent communication. So it just a simple example so that you can see, how can I ask these questions? And then what you're going to do is take the information from that and use the insight in order to help you come up with new actions and what you're going to do moving forward, right? And you can use that, the information, the feedback. This is basically just a strategy to help you get some feedback from the goal for 2024 in this case, that you can bring into 2025 and use that information to say, well, what am I going to do differently that can help lead to the outcome that we want? And so maybe your goal for 2025 in this case would be that in order to enhance team collaboration, you're going to introduce the biweekly strategy meetings along with the weekly check-ins, right? So that you are attacking things on both sides, and you're going to improve communication by sending biweekly update emails, right? Create a template so that it makes it easier for people to put the information in where it's needed, rather than one of the hardest things people have is sort of getting started writing. Started with the email, started with papers, right? So if you have a framework or a template or a strategy that will help you get started, you can eliminate some of that overwhelm so that you can actually move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. So, any final thoughts on this as we wrap up this episode?
No final thoughts. Well, if there is a final thought, is go easy on yourself in the new year. Don't try to do too much. You have a goal and plan to take it piece by piece. Don't try to like do the whole thing all at once.
I like that. I'm gonna do a whole thing all at once, and then but I have learned to be grace filled for myself. I like the whole book thing. And like I said, I didn't die, and the world did not come to an end. It was for me, which is interesting because one of the books that I read early in the year was the 4 agreements, and the first agreement is to be impeccable with your word. And so sort of setting goals and making commitments. Part of being impeccable with your word is honoring those things. And so but at the same time, another one is to you give yourself some grace. You do the best you can. So you're impeccable with your word. You set the commitment, be resolute, and then you do the best you can. And there was a meme that I saw last year that sometimes giving 80% is giving 100%. If all you have to give is 80%, then you've given 100%. And so if that's the best you can do, it's the best you can do.
Yeah.
And we have to learn to be okay with that.
Agreed.
Okay. So, with that, we want to thank you for joining us for this first episode of the year. If you are watching us on YouTube, whether live or on replay, like, subscribe, and share with a friend who could benefit from this information. If you're watching us on LinkedIn, we want to thank you, and we ask that you drop in the chat win-loss audit. I would be happy to make a copy of that available to you. Again, you don't need the document, but if you think that would be helpful for you to get it finished, please feel free to do that. It's simple, 3 questions: win, loss. On the win side, what worked, what didn't work, and how can you replicate what did work on the loss side? What didn't work? What factors led to that? How can you avoid it? And so, Robert, if someone wanted to get together with you and talk about how you could help them reach their goals, how would they go about doing that?
They can reach me at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com, or they can just send me an email at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching. Inspire me at Robert Hilliard Coaching, and I will get back to you and we can talk about how we can work together.
Awesome. And if you'd like to connect with me, shiftingintoaction.now.site, shiftingintoaction.now.site. If you are interested in being on the program, we're always looking for leaders to interview. Reach out to Robert or I. We would love to talk to you about being a part of the program. And if you've got a topic you would like for us to cover, you can drop that in the chat or send a message to either of us. We love to look at topics that are of interest to the audience. And with that, I wanted to mention that we have an interview episode coming up next week. And so we hope that you will join us for that interview. It is a good one. It is Emily Ramos, and she is a leadership coach and consultant as well. And she's doing a great job with her clients and her program. And so we want to highlight what she's doing. With that, again, thank you for joining us. Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
New Year, and take care.
Bye now.